Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being.
Welcome to the 169th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And as you know, this month's theme has been all about nutrition, food, and mental health. So on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about how workplaces can embed this idea of nutrition for mental well-being. Is this your first show or are you a regular listener? And if you enjoy this episode, why not leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from? I'm really keen to get the message out there about mental well-being, and everyone has their part to play. So why not share this and tag me in? I'd love to hear what you think of the shows. So this series has been an in-depth look at food, nutrition, and mental health. And if you want to go back and check out episode 166, I define some of the key tenets of this. So now I thought it's time to look at the ways workplaces can incorporate the two, nutrition to improve mental well-being. One of the challenges is it might seem disconnected, this idea of nutrition and mental health in the workplace. One of the things that might seem connected is this idea of nutrition and mental health in the workplace. However, workplaces, as we know, have a big role to play here. It's estimated that over our working careers, we consume as much as 60% of our food and drink in the workplace whilst at work. And we spend, as I said, more than 40 years on average of our life at work. I mean, that's a phenomenal amount. So nutrition shouldn't be seen as a luxury, an add-on, or something to think about. It's really about how every employer has a responsibility to consider the kinds of food that are offered in their workplace, the impact it can have on the well-being of their staff, the choices offered, and how people have the option to consume the food in the way they want to. As I mentioned in the first episode for this series, I talked about the research evidence and the link between food and mental well-being. Also, how we eat, connection, and access to food, which has been increasingly difficult for many people. And being able to hydrate is also a key part of this. Another consideration is how diverse food needs are, taking into account cultural, dietary, religious requirements as well. In addition to staff who might be working on their feet in a warehouse, for example, compared to an office worker who will sit at the desk for most of the day, maybe just walk around to go to meetings, especially those of us who've been working in a hybrid way, and it feels very much that we are supplanted, that we are glued to our screens. There's also a difference between the way in which people prefer to eat, whether those are 3 big meals a day versus snacking, grazing, more meals throughout the day, so more than 3, but less in terms of quantity. Post-pandemic means, as we know, that hybrid working is more popular. Fewer people might be in the office during the week. So how do we ensure that all staff are looking after themselves in the best way? So I really hope you're enjoying the content of this podcast and you want to keep up to date. Then why not join my bi-monthly newsletter? When you sign up, you'll receive a free copy of my ebook, The Mentally Healthy Leading Manager. And the link to join is bit.ly/MHLMEBK21. And I will also leave that link in the show notes. So I'm just going to share a few ways workplaces can improve staff mental well-being via nutrition. And I think the first thing is when we join a company, we will often get given a form to fill out online with our next of kin details or information about any preferences or health and safety issues. I actually think dietary preferences need to be added to this, much like next of kin details. Now, this may sound odd, but it shows that we're serious as organizations and we want to know people, and they don't have to keep being asked, whether that's for a meeting, an event, etc. And we can also capture food allergies, intolerances, cultural and religious requirements. And if people are happy for this to be shared across the business, they could tick a box, and then when people are booking meetings, they can see the requirements. Because how many times have you been asked over and over again for any dietary requirements? Now, absolutely, that's really important, but there's a much easier way to do this, and it normalizes it, and it means that we can have conversations and cater to people. The second thing is, please don't make this about weight and calories. Honestly, please. I remember having an interim job at one point for 6 months, and on my first week in this role, people were weighing themselves in the office. I think it was on a Tuesday morning, and people would weigh themselves, and it was like a competition of who's lost weight. And it was so gross because that is completely unprofessional. Now, if people want to lose weight and they want to be supported with that, absolutely. And managers and workplaces have a role in that if people have a space to talk about that. It might be that people need to lose weight. They've been told to lose weight for a surgery. Perhaps it's something that someone wants to do. Now, I absolutely respect that, but I think a culture of scales in the office is bizarre. Again, if people need time, they want to go in their lunch hour to go to Weight Watchers or Slimming World or weight loss club or group, yes, we need to respect that. But I really don't think that should be happening in the workplace. So this idea that, healthy eating falls into the category of physical health, which I do understand, but as I mentioned in episode 166, it's more narrowly associated with this weight and weight loss. Now, we need to move away from this. It is about nutrition, how we nourish ourselves, how we give ourselves the energy to be able to do our work and put nutrients into our body. So I think when we focus on weight, what happens is it becomes really off-putting for so many people. We don't want our workplace to make us feel like, oh my gosh, this is another space where we're talking about dieting and the negative connotations that brings. And this whole idea about being judged, what are you eating, clean eating? And if people want to do clean eating, that's great, that's up to them, but that shouldn't be put on everyone. So when I talk about this as well, I'm not saying banish all cakes because they don't have much nutritional value. Of course, when there's celebrations and things like that, and we celebrate with sugar, there'll be times where that's so important, but it is about the choice and the option. So we don't want anyone to feel judged, and we don't want anyone to feel like, oh, you can't eat cake here, you can't do this, and you can't do that. You must eat your 5 a day. And then that just really riles some people up. We also don't know people's triggers and the kind of households that they grew up in. So it might be that some people didn't have food. It might be some people only were allowed to eat healthily. Food used as a tool of coercive control for people. So what we want to do is to broaden it out and to give people choice and to talk about this nourishment and this food and having conversations about what kinds of food people might like at a meeting, maybe sharing some useful recipes that people can either opt into or not opt into, with the point of, here's a nice winter warming soup, and we'll leave it there. So it's not this obsession about weight loss. So that definitely is super important to me. The third thing is in terms of how we eat, when we eat, and the ways in which we could be eating better. And I don't mean about the food, I'm talking about taking a break and not stuffing down a sandwich at our desks. So we have a campaign in this country, or we did, I haven't seen it for a while, called Reclaim Your Lunch Break. And many French colleagues and people that I work with think this is hysterical because they say, well, that just wouldn't happen in France. We all take a lunch break. It's a very integral to the culture, which we don't have here in the same way. So not scheduling meetings over lunchtime unless lunch is provided or people are given the space to eat while the meeting's happening, which isn't ideal, but that's better than just saying, right, come to this meeting at lunchtime. We also know that when we're more hungry and tired, we're going to crave fatty and sugary foods over nutrient-dense foods. So that doesn't really help people. Encouraging people to take their lunch break, to step away, and not scheduling meetings over this time is really important. So lots of organizations will have core hours, 10 till 4, so people can have time for caring responsibility, particularly school drop-offs. But this is also important because we need to encourage people to nourish themselves. And then following on from that, encouraging people to socialize and learn about each other, potentially over a bring and share event with labeled food. This can also really help people to talk about their culture if that's something relevant that you want to do. But it's so that people aren't eating in isolation, sending emails, looking at their phone, feeling really stressed. Now, I also appreciate for many people, they don't want to socialize, so respecting that too. But if we think about food and connection and how people can get to know each other, this is a really great way to do that. So not only encouraging a lunch break, but encouraging a social lunch break or an environment and atmosphere where people have camaraderie and can eat together. And then Fifthly, if you have an in-house contracted caterers, having conversations about nourishing foods that support positive nutrition. And many of you will know about nudge theory, and there's a whole book that's been written about it. So the idea is this is a kind of tweak in design and flow that encourages people to make healthy choices than the easier ones. So if we think about a lot of buildings and workplaces, there will be a vending machine, and vending machines or stations, actually, that's a really good example. On the platform, you're bored, your train's delayed, because inevitably all trains seem to be delayed at the moment, and there's a vending machine. So you might be hungry, your train might be delayed, and these vending machines have chocolate bars, crisps. Again, I'm not saying we should never eat them. I'm not saying that they're terrible, but that is the go-to. And even cafes on station forecourts and things, they are not the most nourishing foods available there. So this is the thing. So it's easy, it's readily available, it's there, and it's right in front of you. You're annoyed, you're angry, you have to wait for your train. But if we think about nudges would be having, sometimes you see it in supermarkets, free apples for children to snack on while you're going through the supermarket. So presenting these healthier choices as the easier one, while saying to people, well, you've got the freedom to choose. So you might also see fruit at the canteen, at your canteen or workplace, restaurant, cafe, as you're paying at the till, so you can encourage people to make the healthier choices. So nudge theory was developed by Richard Thaler, and he's co-author of the influential book Nudge, Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth and Happiness. And he won the 2017 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. So the theory is based on behavioral economics, which recognizes and takes advantage of the fact that actually we act out of habit in response to our environment, what's right in front of us. And if we have slightly different choices in front of us, then we make different choices. So it's due to the environment rather than really deep conscious deliberation, which of course can link to bias. So do check out that episode on unconscious bias if you're interested. And finally, provide support for those struggling internally. So there may be a group of staff that, given the economic circumstances, they don't have access to fresh foods, enough nourishing foods. So thinking about ways in an empowering, not patronizing way to have internal donation and potentially external as well, and private avenues for staff to discuss this and get help if they need to. I don't really know what that looks like, but it's been something, and it will be different for different organizations, but definitely something that's been at the forefront of my mind, given the economic situation. So if this is something that you're interested in and your organization, business, place of employment have done this, I'd love to hear from you. So please do get in touch with me. And you can do that by emailing me at Leyla, Leyla, at diverseminds.co.uk. I'd also really love to know, because I've been out, I work with organizations, not in organizations, but I'd really love to know the kinds of things that are going on that have worked well. And remember, there's a lot of evidence that connects nutrition and mental well-being. That stat that 60% of the food and drink we consume is likely to be in a work environment is astounding. Not everyone will want to socialize when they eat, and I understand that, but providing options, encouraging lunch breaks, thinking about the nudge theory if you have in-house catering, to having those conversations with your caterers about what could be more effective. And as always, use it as a package for daily well-being, as well as to support mental ill health recovery and the options. And this could be another conversation you also have with your employee assistance provider, and information that can be presented on your intranet. So thank you so much for listening. That wraps up our series on nutrition, food and mental well-being and mental health. I'd love to know if you enjoyed it. And remember, you can also leave me an anonymous voice note on my SpeakPipe, and the link is in the show notes. And don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from, and leave a review. And the month ahead, we are going to be talking about intersectionality and disability for Disability History Month. So I hope you'll join us for the next series and beyond. And don't forget, you can catch up on the previous 168 episodes of the Diverse Minds podcast, and let me know what you think. And until then, take care, everyone, and hopefully speak soon.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.